Welcome to Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast with Eric Wolf and Ashi Vale, where we help you become a better industry professional by gaining inspiration from some of the world's most successful people in the food and beverage tourism industry. With each episode, we meet these leaders and examine their secrets of success. We reveal the obstacles and challenges they have faced, along with their solutions and triumphs, and give you ideas and inspirations for many of the same business issues that you may be facing as well. And now for today's episode. Welcome to episode 2 of Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast. I'm Eric Wolf, and joining me today is co-host Ashi Vale.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be your co-host today.
And joining us in the studio today are sibling co-founders of the May Street Kitchen food truck and May Restaurant in Boston, Irene and Margaret Lee.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome, Irene and Margaret, or should I call you May?
Yes, May is my nickname, which actually means little sister in Chinese. And that's actually kind of how our business came to be. We are 2 sibling co-founders out of 3. Our older brother, Andrew, is also part of the business. And he was actually really the one who brought Irene and I into the food business. He'd been working in Boston in different capacities as front of house manager for a whole bunch of different restaurants, from chain restaurants to fine dining. And he was the one who really started in food business for the family.
And is he still in business with you in your current endeavors?
He is. So Andy is definitely still involved in advising the May businesses, and he has also kind of branched out on his own into his own beer mobile, which is actually kind of like the alcoholic version of a food truck, where he rolls up to your party or your festival and has a truck fitted out with beer taps. It's pretty cool.
Wow, what's it called?
It's actually called the beer mobile.
So what are each of your roles at the company?
My role is primarily hands-on right now. I'm in the restaurant almost every day, working with the staff, working with the managers, trying to support everybody, and also in many cases, chopping food, helping wash dishes, greeting guests, and kind of just doing whatever needs to be done.
Now, Irene and May, you own a food truck, a restaurant, you have a bottled sauce company, and you're cookbook authors. What initially drove you to get into food?
This is Irene. Our family has always been obsessed with food. We come from a big Chinese-American family, and anytime we were doing a reunion, a birthday party, any sort of celebration, it was always about the meal. Often that would be like a big Chinese banquet, everybody sitting around the table and sort of fighting over dishes in the middle with chopsticks. If we were on vacation together, the conversation at dinner would be about what we were having for breakfast. And then the conversation at breakfast would be about what we were having for lunch. So I think we've always been very focused on food, just as people and as a family. Ultimately, I think that we all sort of found our way to working in food through different paths. I became really interested in farming. May started a secret supper club in London, and Andy ended up working in the front of the house. He actually got his start as a bouncer and then became really interested and passionate about offering great hospitality at restaurants. In a funny way, we all sort of went in our own directions, and then we converged back in Boston, and this is what happened.
What was the spark that started that was the catalyst that brought you all together to the food truck and the restaurant?
This is May. I think that one of the big things was really about working with each other as a family, and as Irene said, all being very interested in food, but kind of coming through our own paths. We were all talking about how fun it would be to run a business together, but I was actually living in London at the time. Irene was in school in Ithaca, New York, and our brother was back in Boston. And at that time, our father was ill, and we really wanted to spend more time with him. And also, food trucks are growing in popularity, and it seemed like the right time to try to start our own business. And we loved the idea that food trucks are kind of an easy way to enter into the food business, in the sense that the finances that you need to start your own restaurant, you don't need that when you're starting a food truck. And we could kind of experiment with a menu. We could be more flexible. We could be more innovative in a way that if you had needed millions of dollars in investors to open a restaurant, you just don't need that with a food truck. At that time, we opened in 2012, and food trucks were kind of exploding in popularity. It was maybe the tail end of that after Kogi Barbecue Truck in LA, and we really wanted to do something entrepreneurial together.
And what kind of food did you offer at the food truck?
Well, we first started out, we thought it would be so great to make dumplings. Everybody loves dumplings. Every culture has some sort of delicious item wrapped in starch and then
Oh, yeah.
fried or seared or steamed. And we were really excited about the idea of helping introduce people to new ingredients and new flavor profiles in a very familiar and sort of comforting and easy to understand format. So we wanted to do sort of fusion takes on different kinds of cuisine, different vegetables, different meats. So we were really excited about that. And it only took about 2 days for us to realize that we were never going to be able to keep up with the number of dumplings people wanted to eat. And so after that, it was sort of back to the drawing board. We changed the menu every day for many weeks. We would drive around to our different farm partners and just try to figure out what they had and what we could do with it. And then sort of by accident, the scallion pancake sandwich was born. May and our brother Andrew like to fight over who is the first person to really nail the scallion pancake sandwich. I stay out of that one.
Obviously, since I'm here, I get to claim credit for the invention of the scallion pancake sandwich. Thank you very much.
Now we specialize in those sandwiches. Our bestseller is called the Double Awesome, and it's a sandwich with 2 oozy eggs, melted cheddar cheese, and a local greens pesto. We also do market bowls on the truck, and those are basically hearty salads, and it's an awesome way for us to feature a ton of local ingredients, from beans and whole grains to meats and cheese.
It's so great to hear that you guys are sibling co-founders. Can you share some of the highlights and some of the challenges of owning a company together and combining work and family?
We've definitely had some highlights. We've definitely had some challenges. There's the 3 of us, and Andy and I are the 2 older siblings. He's a year older than I am. And then Irene, we call her the baby sister because she is 8 years apart from the 2 of us. So we have a fun dynamic where there's always one person at least disagreeing with the other 2, if not all 3 of us disagreeing. But it's great because I think ultimately we know we can fundamentally trust each other because we're family, and that we will work out our differences, even if, we have to call mom to come settle a dispute. We all bring different things to the table. Andy has his experience in hospitality, and he really will always go above and beyond for our guests, even to an extent sometimes where Irene and I are like, whoa, this is amazing what you're doing, but you're going to break your back if you keep bending over backwards. I have kind of an entrepreneurial background and have run a bunch of different businesses. And so I am always kind of pushing us to consider what new things we can try. And then Irene comes to us from a farming and volunteer background. And so she is always on the hunt for different new suppliers we can work with and farm partners, and is adamant about making sure we're always serving pasture-raised, humanely raised meat, which is kind of something we're known for in Boston. And especially on a food truck at a lunch price point is something that can be difficult to find. So it's cool how we can all, we might argue, but we all respect each other's differences and what is important, what each other's passionate about, and how we can work together to make sure that those are respected.
Who's behind the cookbook? Was that your brainchild, May, or was that Irene, or are you all together?
We both love cookbooks, but it was definitely something that I pushed for a little more strongly, mostly because Irene does more cooking in the restaurant. She's the one who's more
to help with the cookbook.
Yeah. She's the one who's like there if the fire alarm goes off in the middle of the night, which happened recently, or if cook calls out because they're sick, then Irene is the one there in the restaurant cooking. So that gives me the flexibility to be working on this book. We've always loved reading cookbooks, and it was kind of a dream for as long as I can remember, really, to produce one. And so it was a huge opportunity. We are publishing our book called Family Style with Roost Books, and it will be out in early 2019.
Congrats on the book deal, May. That's exciting.
Thank you so much.
You mentioned reading Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat by Samin Nosrat, who's just awesome.
Yes.
How has that influenced your cookbook?
Well, it's funny. It came out when I was close to the end of writing it, but it was great to read because it's very different from a lot of cookbooks which just present recipes for you to make. And I think Samin's goal is to help teach people how to cook in terms of understanding the components that come together to help people think about, layering flavor and how to adjust and tweak recipes to their liking, both for home cooks and professional cooks. We hire a lot of people at May who don't necessarily have a food background. They don't come from other restaurants. They might come from a totally different career, but love food. They're passionate about it, and they're really interested in learning. We have, Irene especially, works with them very carefully to teach them how to work with ingredients and teach them how to season dishes. And it's cool that a cookbook author is really trying to impart that knowledge to home cooks in a way that is entertaining and fun and very educational. It would kind of fit a little bit into what we try to do in the cookbook, which is have a few professional tips or tips from our professional kitchen that we hope can make cooking life easier in their kitchens.
I know that there are many people who are excited about writing cookbooks, and it's definitely no easy task. Would you mind sharing some of the challenges you've had while writing the cookbook?
One of the things that I came across when writing recipes is just, how specific to be in a way that you're explaining things well for people, but not being overly detailed, but also trying to speak to a broad audience. So we adjusted some things that were recipes that we make in the restaurant. So how do you make this recipe for 4 people instead of 100 people? And how do you explain that in a way that is doable in a home kitchen to someone who might have very little experience cooking or someone who cooks all the time? So tailoring those words and those descriptions was a fun and a challenging task.
Did you have any coaching as you were writing the book or before you wrote it?
Not really. I do read a lot of cookbooks, and so it is nice to kind of get a sense from other authors on the tone that they use or the ideas that they have in trying to impart instructions to people. We have an editor who's great, and we are still, working on figuring out the last part of the cookbook, and so some things might change. I think we kind of tried to keep it fun and conversational in the way that we try to keep, I think, a lot of the things we do in other parts of our business not too fussy and not too serious. Like, we're serious about some things, like Irene is serious about the quality of the ingredients we source, but we try not to be serious about the dishes that we make or the way that they're presented, and they're meant to be enjoyed in the same way we want people to enjoy cooking our recipes and have fun with it, and they're not meant to be super specific or when we teach people how to make dumplings, we say it's okay if it doesn't look like the dumpling that we make because it's going to be delicious no matter what, even if it is just crazy looking.
Related to that, Irene, you had mentioned about being able to offer local, sustainable, and high quality food. How are you able to do that at affordable pricing in Boston?
When I first moved back to Boston, there was a lot of local food available. There were great farmers markets. But what I sort of saw was that in most cases, to have an awesome farm-to-table meal, you had to sit at a white tablecloth and you were going to pay a pretty good amount of money for like a special occasion dinner. And so I became really interested in trying to think about how we buy ingredients in a way that makes those meals affordable. Not a lot of people know this, but in a restaurant, the ingredients, that cost is supposed to be 20% of the overall price of the dish. So if I charge $10 for a sandwich, I'm supposed to make the sandwich with only $2 worth of ingredients. I was stunned to learn that when I got into this business. I did not know that before. And so I think the question a lot of the time is, how do we do things really efficiently? And how do we find out what local products give us the most bang for our buck? So for example, we use a lot of local grains and local beans, and those are really affordable compared to sort of fancier or harder to produce things like cheese or meat or those beautiful little cherry tomatoes that are so tiny and cute. And a lot of that has had to do with just making sure that we are sourcing the ingredients that are a little bit less glamorous really well and making sure that we're doing it in a well-rounded way. Another approach that we've taken in the past, a little bit less so now, is to work with whole animals. So because I'm so passionate about how animals are raised, I knew when we were planning the food truck that I wanted to make sure we only served meat from animals that lived on pasture. Basically animals that get to spend a big chunk of their lives outside doing animal stuff with their animal friends. One thing that I learned was that to buy a pork chop from a pasture-raised pig, that might be $12 or $16 a pound. When you think about how much you would have to charge to afford that cut, that quickly prices you out of a food truck lunch. However, if you're going to buy the entire pig, that might be $3 or $4 or $5 a pound. And then all you have to do is just cut up the whole pig and figure out how to. That's pretty much what I did. We went to the farmer's market and ordered a whole pig, and the farmers delivered it to our house. This was long before the food truck opened. We basically spent an entire day butchering a pig and trying to understand where all the different cuts were from, like how was pork chop related to pork belly, and really just exploring that process, a sense of how we would be able to feed people this great product by being a little bit more creative and by being a little bit more flexible with how we cook and buy things.
I hear your stories about the food cart and some of the things that you've learned along the way. I'm wondering, did you have any coaching or advice, or was this all, learning by the seat of your pants? Because you've turned this into quite a successful business. So how did this success come about? Were you coached, or was it just learning by yourselves?
We definitely started figuring out a lot of stuff by ourselves, but coaching is actually something that we have been exploring a lot recently. And actually, Irene can talk about some of the programs that we're working on, both from the restaurant and also with our staff.
When the food truck opened, we didn't have any one group mentoring us per se, but we got a ton of great advice and support from other people in the industry. And that's something that we've really tried to pay forward as other folks have come and said, I'm thinking about opening a food truck. What kind of advice do you have? So right now we actually have an employee on the truck who's thinking about opening her own business, and we love to involve people like that in what we're doing. In addition to that, we recently signed on with a group of consultants who are helping us offer an open book management training program to our staff. All of our employees come to class once a week, and they really learn about how a business works and how the finances work. And then we show them all of our books. So they know exactly how much money is coming in and exactly how much money is going out and where it's going. Through that, we're hoping that we can all work together to improve the performance of the business. And then one of the other goals after that is to pay out a share of the profits to all of our team members who have helped us so much. So it's been really exciting to be able to work with people who have expertise in these very specific pieces of work. That's been an awesome coaching experience that has come later in the life of our business.
That's interesting to hear you say that, and being open with your books and stuff. I was introduced to this concept it was a woman that I used to work with in New York at American Express. Her name is Sandy Webster, and she wrote a book with her business partner, Peggy McHale, called Black and White Strike Gold. And in that book, they were talking about how hard it was to recruit and retain employees. And employees had their own, you know how employees always have the gossip under their breath, of things about the boss and stuff. And they were having trouble with the employees that weren't really engaged as they would like them to have been. And they said, you know what, we're just going to be open with you because you guys think that we're making all this money and we're actually not. And here are the books.
Right.
And when they were open with them and showed them that how much money it costs to run a business, so yeah, that consulting project's $250,000, but our expenses are $235,000, and they really got it. So I think that's very insightful, that approach.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just read some article online about a restaurateur. I think it was in Seattle, who someone wrote online how upset they were that there was this $14 burger, and they thought that they were really being ripped off by this restaurateur. And the restaurateur actually went online and wrote up a whole article detailing how much he pays for rent, how much it costs for that ingredient, how much he pays everyone hourly in his restaurant, and explained why the burger costs so much. And I thought it's an interesting thing, kind of what Irene alluded to before, is that a lot of people really don't understand the economics of how restaurants work. And there's, everybody kind of knows the idea of how many restaurants don't make it, how many restaurants fail early on, but they don't really know the details or the kind of economics behind it. And it's something that is not really transparent to a lot of people. And they don't really realize, especially in the food industry, where a lot of people don't get paid well, where it's kind of cheap, fast labor for cheap, fast food. People aren't really realizing the costs and what it takes to run a good restaurant, run a good food business.
In addition to transparency, May, what have you found to be the things that have helped you become a good employer in the food industry?
One of the other ways that we've been able to retain some of our amazing staff for 5 years or more, I think, has really been about running this business like a family in certain ways, in the good ways, not the bad ones. But I think that really has to do with getting to know your employees, having a sense of who they are and where they come from, understanding what's important to them, having those sort of deeper conversations that explain why they come to work, what motivates them, what makes them happy, and really just making sure that we're treating everybody at work like a human being. And I think that that's more rare in the restaurant industry than any of us would like to admit, because the work can be so transient. People are here today and they're gone tomorrow. And sometimes you feel like a cog in a machine that doesn't care about you, that doesn't want you to have Christmas off to be with your family, and so on and so forth. So I think we've tried to have just a very human approach to being an employer, and I feel like that's really paid off for us.
Can you share some additional challenges? We hear so much about how difficult it is to own and maintain a restaurant post 1 year.
One of the other big challenges of running a restaurant and having a team like ours has really been trying to understand the kind of feedback that we get from our guests. The vast majority of the feedback that we receive is really positive, but of course, we read our Yelp reviews, we read our TripAdvisor and our Google reviews, and sometimes it's just really hard to feel like you're getting criticism from someone who didn't stop to have a conversation with you about what their experience was. So I think a lot of people talk about what it's like to get reviewed on Yelp. From our point of view, we would do almost anything to make sure that a guest left the restaurant feeling happy. And not because we want a good Yelp review, but because we're here to make people feel good and we want them to be satisfied when they leave. And if we haven't done our job, then we would love for them to tell us that so that we can fix it. And I think that for a lot of people who write reviews, they may not be thinking about the people who are reading them or the small businesses that they might be affecting. That's been a challenge for us at times. And I think that knowing how to take that feedback and make sure that it's constructive, that we pull out the value from it, and we don't let it get us down and we don't let it get our team down. That's been a challenge, but something we've made a lot of progress with.
This is interesting. We've been talking a lot about the operations, how you started your business, and some of the ideas that have branched out from your success. But let's bring this back to the idea of food tourism for a moment. And I'd like to ask you a marketing question. Can you tell us, do you have any idea what % of your customers are actually visiting Boston and not local regulars?
My estimate would be that about 20 to 25% of our customers are folks who are visiting Boston.
So that's a significant portion of your revenue.
Definitely.
And how are they hearing about your food truck?
Well, in a lot of cases, they just sort of stumble across us. We park many days in downtown areas where tourists are doing the Freedom Trail or they're visiting the aquarium. So we happen to just be right there. There's a lot of happenstance. In addition to that, I think that we have been very fortunate to have the kind of business that when people connect with our business, they really connect. We have so many people who come in and say, I'm from out of town, but my best friend who lives here or, who went to college here, they told me I had to come here. I think that we're getting that incredible word of mouth. We have those advocates who are always telling people the really special thing about this business or that one dish you have to get because you can never get it anywhere else. For that reason, I feel like we have a lot of folks walking through our doors who we might only see once or we might only see them when they're in town. And we do have a lot of guests who used to live in Boston and now they don't come in as much anymore, but they say, every time I'm in town, I make sure to come back because I miss you guys.
That's a nice problem to have. Location, and word of mouth are probably what have led to your success and the visitors finding out about you. So Irene and May, what is your favorite food travel memory? Do you have one?
I do. So a couple of years ago, my husband and I, we were living in London. We decided to go on a 5-day bike ride from London to Wales. So that was basically just getting on our bikes and setting across miles of countryside and really not knowing what we were going to be eating. What was just so fun about it is finding these little pubs in the countryside in England. After, biking 30 miles in the morning, you're just ravenously hungry. And I had some of the best meals I've ever eaten along that road. We had some places that we stumbled across. There was a pub that had this big plum tree in the yard, and they made this incredible plum pies for us. So the places during the day that we found were totally serendipitous, but then we looked online for places to stay every night that did a full English breakfast every morning. We just had these fantastic breakfasts with, bacon, tomatoes, and black pudding and mushrooms, and kind of fueled us up to set us out for another 30 miles of bike riding. And that was definitely an incredible experience of food tourism for me.
Irene, what about you?
Well, a more recent memory for me that I know I'm going to treasure forever is I was fortunate enough to be sent to Maui by the Waldorf Astoria last year to do some guest chefing and to visit a bunch of different farms. And one of the things we did was visit the Maui Gold pineapple plantation. I think that I knew what pineapples looked like growing, but I really could not have imagined how incredible a field of pineapple bushes looks. I definitely ate a lot of pineapple when I was there. Certainly the best bite I had was when we were in the field with one of the farmers who owned the business, and he just had a machete in one hand and was holding a pineapple by the greens in the other, and basically just filleted it out in the field. And then handed us slices. I think that's probably going to be the best taste of pineapple I ever have. For me, that was just the perfect experience of having something, tasting something in the right place at the right time and experiencing it in a totally new way.
So the full flavors of the fresh pineapple combined with the drama of the machete-wielding farmer.
Exactly. And they were kind enough to arrange for a rainbow to appear at exactly that time. We actually have pictures of it. It was incredible.
What's next for the company? Where are you guys headed?
We have sort of avoided doing a lot of strategic planning in the past. To me, part of that is that this was always an experiment. We came into this with very little formal experience, and I don't know that if you'd asked us 5 years ago if we'd still have the business, I don't know if we would know the answer to that. This is such a tough business, and so many restaurants go under early on in their lives. I think for a long time we've just focused on being grateful that we're here in the present, we're able to pay our employees and to feed our guests. All of that being said, we're starting to focus on trying to plan for the future, and we have a lot of different ideas about what that might look like. Lots of shiny things out there. But as we do that, we're also really focusing internally on trying to train our managers and our team. So again, making sure that people understand how the business runs, and also really cultivating leadership skills in our staff. Like in many industries, cooks usually become managers because they were the best cook, not because they know anything about management or about leadership. We really want to make sure that we are providing opportunities for our team to acquire those skills and put them to use so that when we expand, our team is as strong as possible.
So a quick little footnote here. Our last guest on the show, Ari Weinsweig from Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, his whole thing was about visioning. They really took the time in the early days to map out a roadmap for the company and what it would look like in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and they continue to evolve that. You might want to have a look at his books on their website and gain some inspiration because he is Mr. Visioning.
He is. I've read his visioning articles over and over again. But I think that the big lesson there is that you start with the end in mind. When you get in your car to go somewhere, you put the destination in the GPS before you start driving so that when you come to a turn, you know which direction to take because you know where you're headed. That's something I've really tried to take to heart in the last year or two. We're working on figuring out what the destination is.
That's a great metaphor. If you could give a single helpful piece of advice to a younger version of you, what would you tell yourself?
If I could talk to a younger version of myself, I think that along with what Irene has said about strategic visioning, it would also be being open to a little bit of meandering, because I think that when we started this business, we also didn't necessarily know what path the business would take and what paths we would take individually. You know, right now I've been working on this cookbook, which is kind of a solo affair, and I've actually really enjoyed the process of creating something mostly by myself, when I thought that what I really wanted to do was be running this business with my siblings and having all these employees and being involved, working closely with other people day to day.
Yeah, we scared her off.
Yeah, I left all the hard work of running a restaurant to everybody else. But it's been a great experience. And I think also being open to new things is a good sideline to knowing where you're going.
Is there a quote from someone else or a quote that you've always thought about that you really love?
One quote that I really love has to do with building teams, which is really some of the main focus of my work right now. And I don't know who to attribute it to, but it's easily Googled. The quote is, "Don't tolerate brilliant jerks." I think what that's about is in many industries, but especially I think in food, where so much of the work is done with so much urgency, people who are really great at their jobs tend to be celebrated the most, tend to be advanced the most. But in a lot of cases, those are not the best people to work with. They're not the people you like. They're not the people you'd want to have a drink with after. We have really tried to create a culture where we put a priority on teamwork and not on individual achievement or performance. And there definitely are people who I think are stronger on the cooking skills side than on the people skills side, and that's totally okay. But in trying to just have a team where everybody is really able to work together, even if they're in really different places in terms of their skill or knowledge, that's been really important to me.
That quote comes from Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix. Yeah, that's great advice. That's really inspirational.
Have you had to work with a brilliant jerk, and were you able to change that person somehow, or did that just not work out?
I think that we all have that in us, to be perfectly honest. There are times where we know we're right and we're impatient and maybe we're a little bit rude about it. But I think that more than just kicking out one brilliant jerk, which would be easier, we've had to sort of teach ourselves to say, let me be a little bit less brilliant and be a little bit more of a team player. And that's really, in the long term, the most sustainable strategy.
Less jerk, more team.
Exactly.
Well, surely you must have a pet peeve in business or life, something that drives you crazy. For me, it's people who say like too much. What are yours?
Pet peeve too.
Yeah, we got a lot of that when we were growing up. I have a pet peeve about people who say sneak peek and they spell peak like a mountain, like it's a surprise mountain.
So for you, it's a spelling issue, May.
It's the people who don't understand homonyms.
I would say in a similarly nerdy vein, this is a semantic issue, not a spelling or grammatical one, but this whole bone broth thing is just bone broth is called stock, and broth is made from meat, which means your bone broth is just a misnomer, and it's just stock, and people have been doing that for ages. I love that people are drinking stock. It's really easy to make. It's so inexpensive, but you know, your bone broth in a 16-ounce bottle that's $8, you can make that at home on the stove, and let's not pat ourselves on the back for that necessarily. Of course, it's great for you. It tastes good.
We're paying the bone broth tax.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're so excited about trying to teach people more about food, trying to demystify some of this stuff that for some diners and for some home cooks, paging through cookbooks seems kind of complicated and scary, and it really doesn't have to be. So that's one of the reasons I'm so excited for the book to come out and for people to hear a little bit more about how we've taught ourselves and how we've just tried to be creative and certainly have made lots of mistakes that we just had to eat and then try again.
Do you guys have a current favorite book you're reading? May, for you, it's probably a cookbook that's part of your nightly reading.
Yes, I'm really into 6 Seasons, A New Way with Vegetables. That's by a Portland restaurateur, I believe, Joshua McFadden. That's a cookbook that I've been returning to a lot recently.
I just finished reading Barbara Lynch's book, On the Line. Barbara Lynch is sort of one of the OG lady chefs here in Boston, and she grew up in the projects in South Boston. She was sort of rough and tumble. There are lots of little vignettes about her stealing school buses and robbing stores, and her story is in so many ways unique and in so many ways sort of prototypical of people who are in the restaurant industry. And it's just been amazing to get a look into her life, how she made her decisions, some of them good, some of them bad. And I think that for a lot of women in particular in this industry, it can be a challenge to really open up about your experience because there's so much scrutiny, especially in a professional kitchen if you're the only woman there. I've admired her for a long time. I now particularly admire her strength and her willingness to just tell the story the way it happened.
Since we're all food lovers here, what's your favorite meal?
One of my favorite meals, which is actually something that we're doing in the cookbook, is, well, it's kind of a fusion between 2 favorite meals. When we were kids, when we would go to Chinese restaurants and have big banquet tables, one of the dishes that we'd always get is a Cantonese-style ginger scallion lobster, where they just cut the lobster into pieces and you have to kind of pry out all the flesh right at the table, and there's lobster everywhere. And then the slightly more sanitized New England version of that is when it's all taken out for you and put into a roll and you eat it sitting right by the beach and there's sand between your toes and your hair is all oceany. We combined those two loves in a ginger scallion lobster roll for the cookbook. So you get those flavors of the Chinese version, but you don't necessarily have to.
Oh my God.
Those New England
This sounds
lobsters.
heavenly, yeah. All right, we're booking our trip to Boston right now.
Excellent.
Irene and May, this is fantastic. What you've done, you've taken us on a journey of your success. You've shown us the elements. So when you started with the community support and the knowledge sharing to get your food truck up and running, you shared how it was a lot of trial and error. You talked about your team dynamic. Then we talked a little bit about customer success. And I think one of the important things for me was this element of fun. I mean, clearly, you guys are having fun doing this, and you respect each other, you respect your employees, and you realize that you're there to enjoy it. So that's a really important element that maybe we didn't really talk a lot about before, but fun is an important part of it.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And I think that helps bring people back to us. That's what helps that word of mouth happen is great interactions with guests, whether we just say hello or whether they have a meal that feels like it was made by someone who's having a good time is something that's important to really have people connect to your business and what you're doing.
We say in our industry that we serve memories and not meals, and I think that that's exactly what you've just explained.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a nice way of putting it.
I remember being at May a couple of years ago in Boston and just remembering what a wonderful spirit and a fun time I had at the restaurant. So congrats to both of you on all of your successes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashi.
Thank you both for your time today. It was
a pleasure.
I want to hang out with you guys. I want to
Come
do
to Boston.
the scallion lobster roll. And
Yes.
yeah, this sounds like a lot of fun. Thank you for your time today, Irene and May. You have a great story and are an inspiration to our industry. Good luck to you both. That's all for this episode of Eat Well, Travel Better, the business of food travel, produced by the World Food Travel Association. Join us next time where we learn from some of the world's most successful people in the food and beverage tourism industry. We'll meet these leaders and examine their secrets of success. We reveal the obstacles and challenges they have faced, along with their solutions and triumphs, and give you ideas and inspirations for many of the same business issues that you may be facing as well. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, eat well and travel better.